Why you'd cry yourself to sleep in feudal Japan. Tonight we're going to tuck you in with a story that will make your student loans feel like winning the lottery. Dim your lights, silence your phone, and prepare to be transported to a time when life expectancy was measured in harvests, not years. Like and subscribe if you've ever thought living in ancient Japan would be all cherry blossoms and samurai honor. Tonight, we're going to cure you of that delusion. Dawn breaks, but so does your spirit. You awaken with a jolt as the first grey light of dawn filters through the paper walls of your hut. The year is 1573, the height of what historians will later call the Sengoku period, the age of warring states. You are 23 years old, which in feudal Japan makes you practically middle-aged. Half your siblings never made it past childhood, and your teeth have already begun their slow surrender to decay. Your back screams as you rise from your sleeping mat, which is less a bed and more a passive-aggressive relationship with the dirt, floor beneath you. The mat smells of mildew, sweat, and what can only be described as fermented despair. You've been sleeping on it for 12 years. It was your father's before you. Its smell has become so familiar that you can no longer distinguish it from your own. Your hut is small, about the size of a modern parking space, and you share it with your wife, 2 children, and your elderly mother whose persistent cough has been getting worse over the winter. The walls are made of wooden frames covered with paper. They keep out some of the rain and absolutely none of the cold. Your roof is thatched straw that needs replacing, but replacing it would require time, and time is the one resource more precious than food. Speaking of food, it's time for breakfast, which is a generous term for what you're about to consume. On good days, it's a bowl of millet porridge, perhaps with a pickled radish if the gods favor you. Today is not a good day. Today, it's a watery soup made from barley that has seen better centuries, with a texture somewhere between sand and regret. But wait, you protest to no one who cares. Wasn't Japan famous for its rice? Yes, dear viewer, rice exists in Japan. You know this because you spend most of your waking hours planting, tending, and harvesting it. It's also the primary form of taxation, which means that up to 70% of what you grow goes straight to your local lord. Rice is for samurai, for merchants, for anyone but you. You are a peasant, and peasants eat millet, barley, and whatever else can grow in the marginal lands not dedicated to the sacred grain that pays for your lord's collection of decorative armor. You gulp down your soup while seated on the packed earth floor. There's no table. Tables are for people who matter. You matter exactly as much as the tax rice you produce, which is to say, not at all as an individual, but somewhat in aggregate with the other 1,000 peasants in your region. Dressing for distress. Now it's time to dress for the day. Fashion in feudal Japan is simultaneously simple and oppressive. As a peasant, your clothing options are limited to rough hemp or cotton, brown, more brown, perhaps a rebellious shade of beige if you're feeling dangerous. You pull on a simple kozode, a basic T-shaped garment, made from coarse hemp cloth that your wife wove during the winter months. It's been patched so many times that it resembles a map of rice paddies from above. Over this, you tie a simple obi sash that holds your peasant pants, momohiki, closed. The outfit is completed with straw sandals, waraji, that will need to be replaced within the week, as they're already fraying from the daily trek through mud. Your feet are calloused from years of walking on these minimalist shoes that offer all the protection of a harsh glare. Between your toes, a fungus has taken up permanent residence. You've named it Takeshi. Takeshi has been more loyal to you than any possession you've ever owned. You don't bother with a mirror before heading out. Mirrors are for the wealthy, and besides, you already know what you look like. Tired. You were born tired. Your children were born tired. Exhaustion is your family crest. Outside, the morning air is crisp with early spring chill. Cherry blossoms drift on the breeze, which would be poetic if you had time to notice them, or if your nose wasn't chronically stuffed from the respiratory infection you've been battling since winter solstice. Beauty exists in feudal Japan, but like everything else of value, it's not for you. Morning, labor. Rice doesn't grow itself, unfortunately. The sun is barely above the horizon as you trudge toward the rice paddies. Your village consists of about 40 similar huts clustered together for protection, surrounded by the fields that define your existence. During the Sengoku period, villages like yours live in constant fear of marauding armies, bandits, and the occasional bored samurai looking for someone to test a new sword on. Today is planting season, which means you'll spend the next 12 hours bent at a right angle, pushing rice seedlings into flooded fields with your bare hands. Your back will scream, your fingers will bleed. Small leeches will find their way into places you didn't know you had. You wade into the paddy, the cold water reaching mid-calf. The mud squishes between your toes, occasionally concealing sharp rocks or broken pottery that slice into your feet. You barely notice these minor injuries anymore. What's another scar on a body already mapped with them? The local farming collective, your neighbors, who are also your extended family after generations of isolation, work alongside you. There's a rhythm to the labor, a meditative quality that would be soul-nourishing if it wasn't killing you slowly. You plant seedling after seedling, thousands per day, tens of thousands per season. Look to your left. See that elderly man back, permanently bent from decades in this position. That's your future. Look to your right. See that young boy, barely 7, already learning the movements. That's your past. The paddy is a time machine that only moves in cycles, never forward. Midway through the morning, the village headman approaches. He's a peasant like you, but slightly better off, the equivalent of being the tallest ant in the colony. He brings news. The daimyo, your regional lord, will be increasing the rice tax this year to fund his ongoing war with the neighboring province. Last year's tax was 60% of your yield. This year it will be 70%. You nod silently. What else can you do? Complain? To whom? The rocks, the sky, the rice seedlings bleeding between your fingers? Midday. A feast fit for, well, a peasant. The sun reaches its zenith, and you're permitted a brief respite from your battle with the paddy. Lunch is whatever you brought with you, perhaps a rice ball, if your family stored enough from last year's. Portion to spare some. More likely, it's more barley or millet, cold and congealed, wrapped in a leaf. You might supplement this with wild plants foraged from the forest edge, provided they're not one of the many poisonous varieties that thrive in Japan's lush ecosystem. You sit at the edge of the field, your legs dangling into a drainage ditch. Your fellow villagers cluster in small groups, talking in low voices about the weather, the crops, the latest demands from the Lord's tax collectors. No one mentions the war directly. No one has to. War is the background radiation of your existence. The village gossip, there's always one, mentions that the daughter of a farmer from the next village over has been taken as a servant to the daimyo's castle, ostensibly for kitchen work. No one believes this. No one says anything else. Your meal break lasts approximately as long as it takes the field supervisor to finish his own lunch. He's more generous today. You get almost a full quarter hour before the wooden clappers sound again, summoning you back to your perpetual genuflection before the rice gods. As you stand, your knees crack like breaking branches. You're 23 going on 83. The concept of retirement doesn't exist in your world. You will work until you physically cannot, and then you will become a burden on your children until winter or illness carries you away. Afternoon. Delight, if by delight you mean more. Labor. The afternoon sun beats down mercilessly as you return to your stooped position in the paddy. Your kosode clings to your back, soaked through with sweat. The water in the field has warmed to a temperature perfect for breeding mosquitoes, which feast on any exposed skin with the enthusiasm of daimyos at a banquet. It's during this afternoon session that you notice something alarming, a small dark spot on one of the rice seedlings. You lean closer. It's a fungus, the beginning of rice blast disease that could destroy a significant portion of the crop if left unchecked. Your stomach tightens. Crop failure isn't just an agricultural problem, it's a death sentence. You should report this to the headman immediately, but if the crop fails, the Lord will still demand his full tax. The shortfall will come from your family's portion. Better to pray to the local kami spirits and hope the disease doesn't spread. Speaking of kami, your village's Shinto shrine sits on a small hill overlooking the paddies. It's a modest structure, nothing like the grand temples in Kyoto that you've heard about but will never see. The shrine is dedicated to the rice spirit and the mountain god who controls the water flowing down to your fields. Twice a month, you contribute a portion of your meager supplies for offerings, because angering the spirits is even more dangerous than angering your lord. During the Sengoku period, most peasants practiced a syncretic blend of Shinto and Buddhism. The former addressed immediate concerns like crops and weather. The latter offered some comfort about the afterlife, which, given your current circumstances, was something to look forward to. As the sun begins its descent toward the western mountains, your mind drifts to your family. Your wife is pregnant. With your third child, the first two survived, beating the odds in a time when half of all children died before reaching age 5. You're not sure whether to hope this one lives or dies peacefully before knowing the burden of existence. Such thoughts visit you daily, unwelcome guests you've stopped trying to evict. The afternoon brings storm clouds gathering over the mountains. Rain would normally be welcome for the fields, but too much could flood the paddies and wash away weeks of work. Weather is yet another lord you serve, capricious and demanding. The Lord's procession, freeze or die. Your contemplation of the weather is interrupted by a sound that turns your already chilled blood to ice. War horns and drums approaching. From the East Road, the daimyo's procession is coming. Perhaps he's moving between castles. Perhaps he's touring his lands. Perhaps he just felt like terrorizing the peasantry today. His motivations are as irrelevant to you as yours are to him, the headman shouts, for everyone to clear the roads and kneel, heads bowed. You scramble out of the paddy, mud clinging to your legs as you rush to the roadside. Presentation matters, even for peasants. Standing in the wrong place during a lord's procession isn't just bad manners, it's potentially fatal. You kneel in the dirt at the roadside, forehead pressed to the ground. You must not look up. You must not speak. You must, for all practical purposes, cease to exist as a person and become merely part of the landscape, less significant than the decorative rocks in the Lord's garden. The procession is elaborate, even by daimyo standards. First come the ashigaru, foot soldiers armed with spears and matchlock guns. They march in formation, their steps synchronized, their armor gleaming despite the overcast sky. Behind them ride the samurai, each worth more than your entire village in equipment alone. Their armor costs more than everything you and your entire extended family will earn in 3 lifetimes. The silk cords alone that tie their armor plates together represent years of work for someone like you. And they have dozens of such outfits. You feel, rather than see, the procession stop near your position. A horse stands so close that its hot breath mists the back of your neck. You dare not move. You dare not breathe. Perhaps they've stopped because someone further ahead didn't bow deeply enough. Perhaps they're just adjusting their formation. Perhaps you, peasant, the voice comes from above, from horseback. One of the samurai has addressed you directly. This is rarely good news. Speaking to a samurai without permission can result in immediate beheading. Not responding when addressed is equally fatal. You're caught in a paradox where all paths potentially lead to your death. You press your forehead harder into the dirt, hoping to disappear entirely. "Yes, honorable lord," you manage to whisper. "Your rice looks diseased. Is your village trying to cheat our lord of his proper tax?" Your heart stops. He noticed the rice blast. Of course he did. Samurai may be warriors, but they're also administrators. They know rice as intimately as you do, if for different reasons. "No, honorable lord," you stammer, face still in the dirt. "We noticed it only today. We will burn the affected plants immediately." There's a long silence, during which you contemplate whether your children will remember your face after you're gone. Then, see that you do. If the disease spreads, your village headman will answer with his head. As the procession continues down the road, you remain frozen in position. No one moves until the headman gives the signal that they're truly gone. Only then do you raise your mud-caked face, meeting the eyes of your fellow villagers. No one speaks, no one needs to. You all understand what almost happened. Early evening. Family matters and matters of survival. The work horn sounds, signaling the end of your time in the fields. The sun hangs low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would be beautiful if you weren't too exhausted to appreciate aesthetics. You trudge back toward your village, your legs heavy, your back screaming, your hands raw. The village comes alive in a different way as dusk approaches. Children who spent the day helping with lighter tasks or watching younger siblings run between the huts. Women tend to cooking fires. Men gather to discuss tomorrow's work or repair tools by the last light of day. Your hut comes into view, smoke rising from the small cooking fire outside. Your wife sits beside it, grinding soybeans with a stone mortar, while your 5-year-old daughter fans the flames. Your 3-year-old son sleeps on her back, tied there with a strip of worn cloth. Your mother sits nearby, her gnarled hands separating dried herbs for medicine. The daimyo's procession passed through. You tell your wife as you approach, no need to elaborate on the terror of the moment. She nods without looking up. This is
life. Tanaka's cow is sick, she responds, exchanging one piece of potentially catastrophic news for another.
Tanaka is your neighbor. His family and yours share the cow, the only one in your section of the village. If it dies, there goes your milk, your occasional meat, and your help ploughing the vegetable plot. I'll check on it after eating. You sigh, though what you know about cow diseases could fit in a grain of rice with room to spare. Still, showing concern is important. Village life is interdependent. Today you help with Tanaka's cow, tomorrow he helps rebuild your leaking roof. Dinner is served as the last light fades from the sky. Tonight's meal is a slight improvement over breakfast. Barley, mixed with small bits of dried fish, a handful of soybeans and some pickled vegetables from last season's garden. A feast by your standards. You eat quickly, with little conversation. Energy spent talking is energy not spent eating or resting. After dinner, your wife tells you that the village midwife stopped by. Your unborn child is positioned incorrectly and may cause difficulties during birth. The midwife recommended an offering at the shrine to the goddess of childbirth. An offering means food or precious coins that you can't spare. But what choice do you have? Childbirth in Sengoku-era Japan claims 1 in 3 mothers. The odds are already stacked against your wife. You take a small portion of dried fish, protein you desperately need, and wrap it in a clean cloth for tomorrow's offering. Your stomach protests, but some hungers outweigh others. Night falls. So do your hopes. Darkness blankets the village completely now. There is no electricity, no streetlights, not even many oil lamps. Oil is expensive, and your eyes have adapted to working by firelight and moonlight. The inside of your hut is illuminated only by the dying embers of the cooking fire, casting long shadows that dance across the paper walls. This is the time for family, for stories, for the small moments of human connection that make your existence bearable. Your daughter asks for a story, her eyes wide in the dim light. You tell her about Momotaro, the peach boy, a tale your father told you. The story features demons and talking animals and heroic quests, everything absent from your actual
life.
And so Momotaro, with his companions, the monkey, the pheasant, and the dog, travelled to the island of the demons to retrieve the village's stolen treasures. Your daughter listens, enraptured, temporarily freed from the confines of your shared reality. Your wife mends clothing by the fire, occasionally adding details to the story that you've forgotten. Your mother has already fallen asleep, her breathing laboured but steady. These quiet evening hours are the only time you feel like more than just a rice-producing machine. The moment shatters as shouting erupts from the village centre. You rush outside, telling your wife to stay with the children and your mother. The night air is cool against your face as you join other men hurrying toward the commotion. At the village centre, a messenger has arrived on horseback, a rare sight that never brings good news. He's speaking quickly to the headman, who looks increasingly distressed. You catch fragments. Northern border, Lord Oda's forces. Requisitioning able men, tomorrow at dawn. The news spreads through the gathered crowd like fire through dry grass. Lord Oda Nobunaga, a powerful daimyo, whose territory borders yours, has launched a campaign against your lord. Every village is required to provide able-bodied men to serve as ashigaru, foot soldiers, or labourers for the defensive effort. Your village must send 20 men out of 60 adult males. That's 1/3 of your entire workforce. The headman begins reading names from a scroll. You hold your breath, praying to every kami and Buddha you can think of. Not you, not now, not with a baby coming and the harvest approaching. Tanaka Hiroshi, Yamamoto Kenji, Ito Taro. Names continue. You know these men. They're your neighbors, your cousins, your friends. Nakamura Jiro. That's you. Of course it's you. The gods have never listened before. Why would they start now? Being conscripted as an ashigaru is effectively a death sentence. Peasants receive minimal training, poor equipment, and are used as human shields for the samurai. Few return. Those who do often come back missing limbs, eyes, or their sanity. Your wife doesn't cry, not fully. Tears are yet another luxury you can't afford to waste. Instead, she silently helps you prepare what you'll need. An extra pair of straw sandals, a small knife, a bowl for food. You give her instructions on managing the field work, on dealing with the tax collector, on which neighbor to ask for help with the heavy lifting. Neither of you mentions the possibility that you won't return. Neither of you sleeps. Midnight reflection. The beautiful and the damned, unable to sleep, you step outside your hut. The night is clear, the stars brilliant in a way modern humans will never experience through light-polluted skies. The moon hangs low and full, illuminating the landscape in silver. Mount Fuji, distant but visible on clear days, is a shadow against the night sky. In this moment of quiet desperation, you find yourself contemplating the strange duality of your existence. You live in what future generations will romanticize as one of the most aesthetically sophisticated cultures in human history. The samurai who could end your life on a whim compose poetry about cherry blossoms. The lords who tax you into starvation commission exquisite paintings and gardens. The priests who demand offerings create temples of sublime beauty. Yet here you are, your fingernails caked with mud, your stomach half empty, your future measured in seasons rather than years, creating nothing that will last beyond your brief life. The moon reflects in a puddle by your feet, silver light on muddy water, just as the splendor of feudal Japan reflects differently. Depending on one's station, cherry blossoms fall and samurai compose verses about their beauty, while you pick them out of your drinking water and wonder if they're edible. The Lord's castle stands strong against the mountain, while your hut bows under the weight of rain. Both Japanese, both built by human hands, one remembered for centuries, one forgotten before it fully collapses. You've heard whispers of the life inside castle walls, of silk robes and painted screens, of gardens designed to look effortlessly natural while requiring constant maintenance by people like you. You've glimpsed the elegant curves of temple roofs, the vibrant colors of samurai processions, the delicate paintings on folding screens. None of it is for you. You are the foundation upon which that beauty is built, the unseen supporting pillar, the fertilizer in the soil that nourishes the cherry tree. Tomorrow you march to war for a lord who doesn't know your name, in defense of a system that sees you as a resource rather than a person. You will probably die anonymously on some muddy field, your body left for birds or hastily buried in a mass grave. If you're extraordinarily lucky, you'll return to this life of beautiful suffering. You look at your calloused hands in the moonlight. These hands have planted rice, built walls, cradled children, clasped in prayer. These hands have never held a sword, never written a poem, never painted a picture. Yet they have created and sustained life in their own way. Perhaps that's your small victory over the system that crushes you. You persist. Despite disease, despite hunger, despite war and taxes and the casual cruelty of those above you, you continue to exist. Your children continue to exist. The village continues to exist. It's not much. It's everything. You turn back toward your hut, toward your family, sleeping inside. Tomorrow will arrive too soon, bringing conscription and separation and fear. But for now, in this brief midnight moment, you allow yourself to feel something like peace. Dawn again. The wheel turns. Dawn breaks over the village once more, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold that would inspire poetry in those with the luxury of appreciating such things. For you, dawn merely signals the beginning of a new kind of suffering. You've barely slept. Your wife helped you dress in your cleanest clothes, still patched and faded, but the best you have. Your children cling to your legs, too young to fully understand, but old enough to sense the gravity of the moment. Your mother places a small pouch around your neck, a protective charm from the local shrine, purchased with precious coins, saved over years for emergencies. This qualifies. The 20 conscripted men gather at the village centre as their families, watch from a respectful distance. Some weep openly, others maintain stoic expressions that crack around the edges. The headman, whose own son was called, performs a brief Shinto blessing, asking the ancestors and local kami for protection. A samurai arrives with several ashigaru to collect your village's contribution to the war effort. He looks bored. This is routine for him, gathering peasant fodder for the war machine. He doesn't make a speech. He doesn't need to explain your duties or inspire loyalty. You'll do as commanded or die on the spot. You look back at your family one last time as you're marched away. Your wife holds your gaze, her face a mask of composure that you know conceals hurricane winds of emotion. Your daughter waves. Your son hides his face in his mother's kosode. Your mother raises a gnarled hand in blessing or farewell, perhaps both. As you crest the hill that will take you out of sight of the village, you notice the rice paddies, stretching green and alive in the morning light. The seedlings you planted. Yesterday will grow whether you return or not. The village will continue whether you return or not. Japan will continue whether you return or not. There is comfort in that continuity, cold though it may be. And so ends our bedtime story, dear viewer. Tonight, you've experienced but a glimpse of life in feudal Japan, not as a samurai hero, not as a refined court lady, but as one of the countless unnamed millions whose labor and suffering built the civilization that would be romanticized centuries later. The beauty of Japan's feudal era was real, the art, the architecture, the poetry, the philosophy. But that beauty was watered with the tears and blood of peasants whose lives were constrained by a rigid social hierarchy, by poverty, by violence, and by the constant struggle against nature itself. The next time you see a beautiful ukiyo-e print or an elegant samurai film, remember the hands that planted the rice. Remember the backs bent double in the paddies. Remember the mothers who bore children, knowing half would die. Remember the villages that burned in the endless civil wars. Remember the beauty? Yes. But remember also its cost. Sleep well, if you still can. The Warring States Survival Guide. What's that? You're still awake? The existential dread hasn't lulled you to sleep yet? Well then, let's continue with some practical survival tips for your new life in Sengoku-era Japan. Health and hygiene. Spoiler alert, you're doomed. Let's talk about your new healthcare plan in feudal Japan. It's comprehensive in that it comprehensively doesn't exist. Got a toothache? Pray it kills you quickly. Broken bone? Hope it's not one. You need mysterious rash? Name it after yourself for posterity. The good news is that some aspects of Japanese medical knowledge are surprisingly advanced for the era. The bad news is that none of it will be available to you as a peasant, while court physicians might understand concepts of sterilization and have sophisticated pharmacopoeias. Your village medical care consists of herbal remedies of varying effectiveness. Moxibustion, burning herbs on or near your skin. Acupuncture, with needles that are definitely not sterilized. Prayer, statistically about as effective as options 1-3. Parasites are your constant companions. Intestinal worms compete with you for the few nutrients in your food. Lice explore your scalp like it's an undiscovered continent. Fleas consider your sleeping mat their ancestral homeland. Personal hygiene, despite Japan's later reputation for cleanliness, is limited by your circumstances. Public baths exist in towns and cities, but your village has a river for washing. In winter, this means you'll develop a seasonal aroma that could strip rice husks. Your teeth are already beginning to abandon ship by your 20s, jumping from your gums like rats from a sinking boat. Dental care consists of chewing on medicinal sticks and eventually extraction when the pain becomes too much to bear. The concept of toothbrushing exists in Japan, but like proper medical care, it's primarily for those who don't spend their days face down in rice paddies. But hey, look,
On the bright side,
the average life expectancy for peasants in this era means you won't have to endure these health problems for very long. Entertainment and leisure. Just kidding. Free time is a concept that would baffle your Sengoku-era mind. The idea that hours of the day should exist unfilled with labor would seem as alien as smartphones or indoor plumbing. That said, humans are remarkably resilient in their pursuit of joy, even in the bleakest circumstances. The entertainment available to you as a peasant includes seasonal festivals tied to agricultural cycles or religious observances. Storytelling around the fire. Your local elder knows 3 stories but tells them with enthusiasm. Music played on homemade instruments, bamboo flutes, simple drums. Watching traveling performers who occasionally pass through. Acrobats, storytellers, puppeteers. Village gossip, the original social media, but with more immediate consequences. A few times a year, your village celebrates festivals that momentarily transform your existence. The harvest festival in autumn brings relative abundance, with special foods and rice wine, sake, that's usually reserved for offerings to the gods. The spring planting festival seeks to ensure fertility of the fields primarily, but also of the villagers. These rare occasions of communal celebration are the bright spots in an otherwise monotonous existence. Beyond these structured events, leisure consists of whatever moments you can steal between work and sleep. Men gather to drink, small amounts of sake when available, sharing stories or playing simple gambling games with dice made from knucklebones. Women socialize while working, spinning, weaving, or preparing food together makes the labor more bearable. Children who are put to work as soon as they can walk somehow still find time to play with homemade toys, dolls fashioned from straw, balls made from pig bladders, or sticks that become swords in imaginary samurai battles. For those rare peasants who somehow become literate, a whole world opens up, though books are precious commodities far beyond your means. A handful of villages might share a single religious text, passed between those who can decipher its characters. It's worth noting that despite the hardships, Sengoku-era Japan was developing a rich cultural tradition. The arts of no theatre, tea ceremony, and landscape gardening were flourishing, just not for you. The aesthetic principle of wabi-sabi, finding beauty in imperfection and impermanence, was gaining prominence, though it's easier to appreciate impermanence when you're not actively trying to avoid it on a daily basis. Your entertainment options are limited not just by resources but by rigid social expectations. Dancing too enthusiastically, singing too loudly, or enjoying yourself too visibly might be seen as inappropriate for your station. Samurai can compose poetry about the moon. You should keep your eyes on the ground where they belong. Religion and superstition. Hedging your spiritual bets. In Sengoku-era Japan, the line between religion and everyday life doesn't exist. Spiritual practices permeate every aspect of your existence, providing both comfort and additional anxiety. You inhabit a world teeming with invisible forces that must be respected, appeased, or avoided. Your spiritual landscape is a syncretic blend of indigenous Shinto beliefs and imported Buddhism, with a dash of Confucian ethics thrown in for good measure. This isn't contradictory to your medieval mind. Different spiritual systems serve different purposes. Shinto, with its reverence for natural forces and local kami spirits, governs your immediate world. Every significant natural feature, the mountain overlooking your village, the river that feeds your paddies, the ancient tree at the village boundary, houses a spirit that can help or harm you depending on how it's treated. Your relationship with these kami is transactional. You leave offerings, food, sake, small tokens, and in return, you hope they'll protect your crops from hail, your children from disease, your home from fire. When bad things happen anyway, you assume you've offended some spirit or another and increase your offerings. Buddhism offers a different kind of comfort, the promise that your suffering has meaning, that your current miserable existence is just one turn of the wheel, and that through proper action and devotion, your next life might be better. Given the circumstances of your current life, reincarnation sounds like a pretty good deal, even if you come back as a moderately well-treated ox. Local Buddhist temples serve as centers of learning and culture, though as a peasant, your interaction with them is largely limited to major ceremonies and mandatory donations. The monks can read and write, know medicine, and sometimes intervene with samurai authorities on behalf of the village for a price. Beyond these organized religions, a vast network of superstitions governs your daily actions. You avoid cutting your fingernails at night lest you die before they grow out. You never stick your chopsticks upright in a bowl of rice because that's how offerings are made to the dead. You refuse to sleep with your head pointing north because that's how corpses are positioned. The boundaries between the living and spirit worlds are thin, especially during certain times of the year. Obon Festival in summer honors ancestral spirits who return to visit their families. Ghosts, demons and monsters, yokai, are not metaphorical. They're very real threats that shape your movements and decisions. That sound in the forest at night. Not an animal, it's a tengu, a mountain demon with a long nose and wings. That woman asking for directions after sunset. Could be a regular traveler, or could be a fox spirit disguised as a human to trick you. That unexplained illness affecting your neighbor. Possibly a vengeful ghost or a curse placed by a rival. During the chaos of the Sengoku period, with its constant warfare and disruption of social order, superstitious beliefs intensify. Unusual weather, strange animal behavior, or celestial events like comets are interpreted as omens. Even the samurai class, with their Buddhist-influenced warrior code of Bushido, consult diviners before battle and choose auspicious days for important actions. For you as a peasant, religion and superstition are both comfort and burden. The rituals provide structure and hope in a chaotic world, but they also demand resources you can barely spare. The local shrine expects offerings. The Buddhist temple requires donations. Protective amulets cost precious copper coins. Even the simplest home shrine needs regular maintenance and fresh offerings. In a world where so much is beyond your control, weather, war, disease, the whims of your lord, these spiritual practices offer an illusion of agency. You cannot prevent a typhoon from destroying your crops, but you can offer rice to the kami of the wind. You cannot cure your child's fever, but you can place a protective amulet above their sleeping mat. You cannot escape the crushing social hierarchy, but you can hope for a better position in your next life. Faith is both the opiate of the masses and their only reliable medicine. Social hierarchies. Know your worthless place. When it comes to social mobility in feudal Japan, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that there isn't any. The good news is... there is no good news. Sengoku-era Japanese society operates on a rigid class system that determines everything from what you can wear to how you can speak to whether you live or die after a minor social faux pas. The social hierarchy, influenced by Confucian principles and codified by military rule, places you firmly at the bottom of a very tall ladder. Above you, in descending order of importance, are the emperor, so theoretically important that practically speaking, he's irrelevant to daily governance. The shogun, the actual military ruler of Japan, when there is one, during the Sengoku period. Daimyo, regional lords who spend most of their time trying to kill each other. Samurai, professional warriors who serve the daimyo and occasionally practice calligraphy between beheadings. Monks and priests who maintain a spiritual hierarchy parallel to the secular one. Merchants, wealthy but theoretically lower class because they produce nothing. Artisans, skilled craftspeople who make everything from swords to teacups. Peasants, that's
Congratulations on not being dead last.
outcasts, burakumin, who handle unclean professions like tanning or undertaking. This hierarchy isn't just an abstract concept, it's enforced through elaborate codes of conduct, dress regulations, speech patterns, and severe punishments for key violations. As a peasant, you bow deeply to samurai, use the most respectful language forms, and generally try to become invisible in their presence. You may be wondering, is there any way for me to move up in this system? The short answer is no. A slightly longer answer is also no, but with more circumstances. In rare cases, a peasant boy might be adopted into a samurai family if he shows exceptional martial promise or if the family has no heir. A peasant girl might be taken as a concubine to a samurai or daimyo if she's exceptionally beautiful. Neither of these scenarios is likely to happen to you, and both would require cutting all ties to your former life. In the extremely unlikely event that you distinguish yourself in battle while conscripted as an Ashigaru foot soldier, you might be granted
Minor samurai status.
This would be the medieval Japanese equivalent of winning the lottery while being struck by lightning and discovering you're secretly the long-lost heir to a fortune. So don't count on it. More realistically, your social mobility works horizontally rather than vertically. Through hard work, good harvests, and absolutely no natural disasters or wars, good luck with that in the Sengoku period, your family might gradually acquire more land or resources than your neighbors. Your son might marry into a slightly more prosperous peasant family. Your daughter might become a servant in the household of the village headman rather than working in the fields. These microscopic improvements might compound over generations, potentially resulting in your great-grandchildren being slightly less miserable than you are. It's not exactly the American dream. The rigid social hierarchy extends even within your peasant village. The village headman occupies a position of relative privilege, serving as the intermediary between the village and the samurai authorities. Extended families have their own internal hierarchies, with the eldest male typically holding authority over the household. Even in your own home, strict hierarchies prevail. As the male head of household, you have authority over your wife, children, and elderly parents, though this authority comes with crushing responsibility for their survival. Your wife has authority over your children and any servants, which you don't have. Your children have authority over even smaller children. Even in abject poverty, everyone needs someone to look down on. This rigid stratification serves the ruling classes by preventing unified resistance to their authority. When everyone is focused on maintaining their small place in the hierarchy, they have less energy for questioning why the hierarchy exists at all. The occasional peasant revolt is quickly and brutally suppressed, serving as an object lesson in what happens when people forget their place. But here's the most insidious part. You largely accept this system. The concept of societal equality would be as alien to you as smartphones. Confucian principles that emphasize knowing one's place and fulfilling one's obligations are deeply ingrained. Buddhism teaches that your current station is the result of actions in past lives. The imperial mythology suggests that the social order reflects the natural order of the universe. In short, you've been told since birth that the samurai deserve to rule because they rule, and you deserve to serve because you serve. This circular logic is reinforced by every aspect of your culture, from religious teachings to folk tales. War. When hell gets bored and decides to visit Earth. They don't call it the Warring States period because everyone was getting along swimmingly. The Sengoku era represents one of the most chaotic and violent periods in Japanese history, where regional lords, daimyo, fought constantly for territory, resources and prestige. And guess who gets to be the cannon fodder, building material and collateral damage in these conflicts? That's right, it's you. As a peasant, your relationship with war is pretty straightforward. You're either trying to avoid it, being killed by it, or being forced to participate in it. When armies clash, they do so on land, often agricultural land that provides your livelihood. A single battle can destroy a season's crops in an afternoon. Armies routinely burn villages to deny resources to enemy forces or simply because they can. Your carefully tended fields and humble home can become a strategic liability in someone else's grand campaign. Sometimes the war comes directly to your village. Armies need supplies, and taking them from peasants is easier than carrying them. This process, euphemistically called foraging in military texts, amounts to armed robbery on a massive scale. Soldiers take your food, livestock, tools, and anything
else of value. If you resist, they kill you. If you comply, you might starve instead.
Is a choose-your-own-adventure where all paths lead to suffering. But wait, there's more. If you're particularly unlucky, your village might be in a strategic location that one army wants to defend and another wants to capture. Congratulations! You're now living in what future military historians will call a theatre of operations, and your home is about to become a stage for the worst performance you'll ever witness. When you're conscripted as an ashigaru, foot soldier, you enter a world even more horrifying than your peasant existence. Ashigaru are equipped with minimal armor and simple weapons, often just a spear, yari, a bow, or in later Sengoku period, a matchlock gun, tanegashima. Your training is cursory at best. Your primary tactical value is that there are lots of you and you're considered expendable. The daily life of an ashigaru combines the worst aspects of military service with the worst aspects of peasant labor. When not fighting, you're digging fortifications, building bridges, or hauling supplies. You sleep on the ground with minimal shelter. You eat whatever can be foraged or supplied, often less than you'd get in your village. Disease spreads rapidly through military camps, killing more soldiers than combat does. And then there's the fighting itself. Sengoku-era battles are chaotic, brutal affairs that bear little resemblance to the stylized duels seen in samurai films.
Large-scale engagements involve thousands of men crashing into each other with spears, swords, and arrows. The noise is deafening. War cries, screams of the wounded, commands shouted and then lost in the din.
The smell is worse. Blood, excrement released by the dead and dying, smoke from matchlock guns. Ashigaru casualties are enormous. In major battles, entire units are sacrificed to test enemy defenses or to shield more valuable samurai troops. If you break and run, a completely rational response to having your friends butchered around you, you might be killed by your own commanders for cowardice. If you fight bravely, you'll likely die anyway, anonymous among thousands. The Sengoku period sees the gradual transition from individual samurai combat to more organized mass warfare. By the late 16th century, Ashigaru units become more professional and better equipped, forming the backbone of daimyo armies. This professionalization slightly improves their treatment and survival rates, but not until after countless peasant soldiers have been sacrificed in the development of these tactics. If you somehow survive your military service and return to your village, you bring back more than just battle scars. Veterans of Sengoku warfare often suffer from what modern psychologists would recognize as PTSD. You jolt awake at night, reliving battles in your dreams. Certain sounds, a bamboo grove, rustling in the wind that sounds like arrow fire, metal, striking metal in the blacksmith shop, trigger memories of combat. You might find yourself unable to relate to villagers who haven't experienced what you have. You also bring back practical concerns. Many Ashigaru return with injuries that never fully heal, limiting their ability to perform farm labor. Missing fingers, limbs with limited mobility, chronic pain from poorly healed wounds. These become your constant companions, along with the nightmares. The bitter irony is that all this suffering rarely changes anything fundamental. Daimyo rise and fall. Territorial boundaries shift. Different banners fly over castles. But for you and your fellow peasants, the underlying reality remains unchanged. You are still at the bottom, still subject to whoever happens to be on top after the blood settles. Natural disasters. When humans take a break from tormenting you. If human-caused suffering isn't enough to make your feudal existence miserable, Japan's geography is happy to fill in the gaps. The Japanese archipelago sits at the convergence of multiple tectonic plates in a region prone to extreme weather events, creating a natural disaster bingo card that regularly fills every space. That's right, folks. Living in feudal Japan means you get to experience earthquakes, ranging from gentle reminders of your cosmic insignificance to village-destroying cataclysms. Tsunamis, because being drowned by regular ocean apparently isn't exciting enough. Volcanic eruptions. Nothing says the gods hate you personally like molten rock raining from the sky. Typhoons, wind and rain in quantities that make your paper-walled hut seem like an especially poor architectural choice. Floods, turning your carefully tended rice fields into scenic lakes. Droughts, turning your carefully tended rice fields into scenic deserts. Landslides, because sometimes the mountain just decides to visit the valley. Unlike modern Japan, which has sophisticated disaster prevention, monitoring, and response systems, Sengoku-era Japan had approximately none of these things. Early warning systems consisted entirely of that old man's knee is acting up, or the cats are behaving strangely. Disaster response was limited to everyone dig through the rubble with your bare hands, and pray harder next time. When disasters strike, they compound the already precarious nature of peasant existence. A single earthquake can destroy storage, buildings, killing entire families instantly, and leaving survivors with no food reserves. A typhoon can flatten rice fields just before harvest, ensuring famine in the coming winter. A landslide can wipe out roads and bridges, isolating villages from trade and aid. The Sengoku period sees several major natural disasters that affect the course of Japanese history. In 1498, the Meio earthquake and tsunami devastate the coast of Nankaido, killing thousands. The 1586 Tensho earthquake destroys major castle towns and temples. These events are interpreted as divine commentary on the political situation, usually as disapproval of whoever is currently in power, though strangely, never as disapproval of the system itself. For you as a peasant, natural disasters carry additional dangers beyond their immediate physical threat. The destruction of crops can lead to famine, which in turn leads to disease as weakened immune systems succumb to infections. Social order breaks down in severely affected areas, leading to banditry and violence. And in the aftermath, taxes rarely decrease to account for your losses. In fact, they often increase as daimyos seek to rebuild their castles and defenses. The psychological impact of living in a disaster-prone region shapes your worldview. You develop a fatalistic acceptance of forces beyond your control. You understand viscerally that existence is impermanent, that prosperity can vanish in a moment, that planning too far ahead is an exercise in hubris. These insights would make you an excellent Buddhist philosopher if you weren't too busy trying to rebuild your hut for the third time this decade. There's a reason that Japanese aesthetics and philosophy embrace impermanence and imperfection. The concept of mono no aware, the pathos of things, the awareness of impermanence, isn't an abstract idea, but a lived reality when you've watched cherry blossoms scatter in the same spring wind that destroyed your neighbor's roof. The wabi-sabi appreciation of imperfection and transience makes perfect sense when perfection is unattainable and everything is transient, often violently so. And yet there's a profound resilience that develops in this environment. Your village has been rebuilt countless times. The rice paddies have been restored after floods, replanted after droughts, reclaimed after landslides. The Shinto shrine has been carefully maintained through centuries of earthquakes. This cycle of destruction and renewal becomes not just a physical reality but a spiritual practice, a communal understanding that persistence itself is a form of transcendence. In modern disaster management, experts talk about building back better, using disaster recovery as an opportunity to improve infrastructure and systems. Your feudal village has its own version of this concept. Each rebuilding incorporates the lessons of past disasters, houses slightly farther from the river, grain storage on higher ground, more flexible building techniques that can sway with earthquakes rather than shatter. This knowledge, passed down through generations of suffering, represents one of the most valuable inheritance systems in feudal society, more useful than any samurai sword or court kimono, though far less glamorous. The food situation, hunger as your constant companion. Let's talk about your diet in feudal Japan, which is best described as minimalist, or perhaps barely adequate on a good day. The gap between what you grow and what you eat is vast, thanks to the tax system that takes a significant portion of your harvest for the ruling classes. For breakfast, we have a watery gruel made from millet or barley, seasoned with disappointment and garnished with whatever wild herbs could be foraged from the forest edge. The texture is reminiscent of sad, wet sand, and the flavor profile highlights notes of desperation with a finish of low-grade hunger pangs. Rice exists in your life primarily as something you grow for others. The white, polished rice that later becomes emblematic of Japanese cuisine is exclusively for the elite. If you're lucky, your family might get to keep some brown rice, the unpolished grains with husk still attached. But even this is often reserved for special occasions or sold to pay for essentials you can't produce yourself, like salt or tools. Your daily carbohydrates come mainly from millet, barley, and in bad times, various root vegetables like sweet potatoes and yams. In the mountainous regions where rice cultivation is impossible, these become the staple crops. They're filling, but nowhere near as prestigious or supposedly delicious as rice. Protein is a luxury you see only occasionally. Meat from wild game might grace your table a few times a year if someone in the village is a skilled hunter, though Buddhist prohibitions against killing animals sometimes limit this practice. More commonly, you might have small fish caught from local rivers, dried and preserved to extend their usefulness. Eggs from the village's few chickens are precious enough that they're often sold rather than eaten by the families that own the birds. Plant proteins become crucial to your survival. Soybeans, processed into miso, tofu, or simply boiled, provide essential nutrients. Various beans and legumes supplement your diet when available. Nuts foraged from forest edges, walnuts, chestnuts, acorns, provide fat and protein during autumn. The Japanese peasant diet, while insufficient in calories and lacking in variety, does have some nutritional advantages over contemporary European peasant diets. The inclusion of soybeans, a wider variety of vegetables, and occasional fish provides better protein and micronutrient profiles than the heavily grain-based diets of medieval Europe. This contributes to slightly better health outcomes in some respects, though malnutrition remains common. Preservation techniques become essential for survival. Without refrigeration, fresh foods must be eaten immediately or transformed into forms that can last through winters and lean times. Fish and occasional meat are dried, smoked, or salted. Vegetables are pickled in salt or rice bran. Soybeans are fermented into miso paste for soup. These preservation methods not only extend food viability, but also create distinctive flavors that become foundational to Japanese cuisine. Seasonal eating isn't a culinary choice but an absolute necessity. Spring brings wild mountain vegetables, sansai, that help replenish vitamin reserves depleted over winter. Summer provides more fresh vegetables and fruits. Autumn is the season of harvest and relative abundance. Winter means relying almost entirely on preserved foods, with fresh items becoming rare luxuries. The most striking aspect of your relationship with food is its precariousness. You live perpetually one bad harvest away from starvation. Crop diseases, pests, unusual weather patterns, natural disasters, or war can all destroy your food security in an instant. Famine is not a theoretical concern but a recurring reality. During the Sengoku period, famines occur with horrifying regularity. The disruption of agricultural systems by constant warfare compounds the effects of natural disasters and crop failures. Historical records document instances of peasants reduced to eating grass, tree bark, and, in extreme cases, cannibalism during the worst famines. The samurai class, while also affected by food shortages, has access to stored rice reserves and can appropriate food from less affected regions. Your village has no such options. When famine strikes, you face impossible choices: which family members eat, how much seed grain to consume versus save for planting, whether to abandon your land entirely in search of food elsewhere. These recurring food crises serve as population control mechanisms in a horrifyingly efficient way. During severe famines, infanticide becomes more common, a practice euphemistically called thinning or returning children to the gods. Elderly family members might choose to stop eating to preserve food for younger, stronger members who can continue working the fields. These are not acts of cruelty but desperate attempts at family survival, where the deaths of a few might ensure the continuation of the line. The psychological impact of perpetual food insecurity shapes your relationship with eating. Food is never casual, never taken for granted. Every grain is precious. Waste is unthinkable. Your children are taught from infancy to eat everything given to them, to express gratitude for even the simplest meals, to understand that hunger is not an exceptional state but the background condition of existence that must be constantly fought against. In this context, the elaborate food aesthetics developed by the aristocratic classes take on an almost obscene quality. While you measure your barley grains to make them last through winter, court nobles create elaborate presentation styles and dining rituals. The multi-course kaiseki meals served in perfect ceramic vessels represent a world as distant from yours as the moon, though they're made possible by your labor. Family life. Love in the time of cholera, and everything else. Despite the crushing hardship of peasant existence, humans remain stubbornly social creatures. Your family becomes both your greatest vulnerability and your greatest strength, the source of additional burdens and the reason you continue bearing them. Marriage in feudal Japan is primarily a practical arrangement rather than a romantic one, particularly for peasants. You likely married around age 15-17 if you're a woman. or 1720 if you're a man, to someone from your village or a neighboring one. The match was arranged by your families with an eye toward mutual benefit, combining land holdings, strengthening village alliances, or ensuring productive household labor distribution. Your wedding was a modest affair by modern standards, but represented a significant expense for both families. A small feast, new clothes for the bride, perhaps a dowry of household items or tools. These stretch already limited resources, but the investment is considered worthwhile because marriage ensures the continuation of the family line and provides the labor force needed for survival. Romantic love as we understand it today isn't absent from your world, but it's considered a happy accident rather than a prerequisite for marriage. If you develop affection for your spouse over time, and many do, that's a fortunate outcome of a practical arrangement. Physical attraction matters less than strength, health, and demonstrated ability to work hard. Children arrive quickly and frequently after marriage. Contraception exists in limited forms, herbal preparations with varying effectiveness, coitus interruptus, extended breastfeeding to suppress ovulation, but cultural and economic pressures favor large families. Children represent both additional labor for the fields and old age insurance in a world without pensions or social security. The flip side of this pronatalist attitude is the harsh reality that not all children can be supported, particularly in times of scarcity. Infanticide, euphemistically called thinning, mabiki, occurs most commonly with female infants, who will eventually leave the family through marriage, or with children born with obvious disabilities who might not be able to contribute labor. These practices, while abhorrent to modern sensibilities, represent agonizing survival calculations in a resource-constrained environment. It's worth noting that infanticide, while practiced, is neither universal nor uncontested in feudal Japanese society. Buddhist teachings specifically prohibit the taking of life, and many villages have customs for helping struggling families support their children. Abandonment at temples is one alternative, as Buddhist monasteries sometimes raise unwanted children. The practice increases during famines and decreases in times of relative prosperity. Your children begin working almost as soon as they can walk. By age 5, they're gathering firewood, watching younger siblings, or shooing birds from fields. By 7 or 8, they're helping with planting and harvesting. By their early teens, they're functioning as adult laborers. Childhood as a protected period of play and development is a luxury concept that won't exist for centuries. Despite these harsh realities, family relationships are not loveless or purely utilitarian. Parents develop deep attachments to their children. Spouses often form strong bonds through shared hardship. Extended family networks provide emotional support as well as practical assistance. The human capacity for connection and care persists even in the most difficult circumstances. Your household likely includes more than just your immediate family. Multi-generational living is the norm, with elderly parents remaining in the household until death. This arrangement has practical benefits. Grandparents can watch young children while parents work the fields, but also carries costs as the elderly consume resources while contributing decreasing labor. The treatment of the elderly varies widely based on resource availability. In prosperous times or wealthier families, elders are respected for their knowledge and experience. In times of scarcity, they may be seen as burdens. The practice of ubasute, abandoning an elderly parent in the mountains to die, exists more as a cultural motif than a common practice, but the underlying tension between respect for elders and resource constraints is very real. Perhaps most striking to modern sensibilities is your relationship with death as a family matter. Death is not medicalized or outsourced, but handled within the family and community. You've washed and prepared the bodies of deceased relatives, participated in funerary rituals, maintained family graves. Children grow up witnessing death directly. understanding it as part of the cycle of existence rather than something hidden away. This intimate familiarity with death isn't merely practical, it's spiritual. Buddhist and Shinto concepts of impermanence, mujo, shape your understanding of life's fragility. Every family maintains a butsudan, a small household altar, where you honor ancestors and make offerings. These rituals connect you to those who came before, creating a sense of continuity that transcends individual mortality. Your family relationships exist in perpetual tension between genuine affection and brutal pragmatism. You love your children fiercely while recognizing that some might not survive childhood. You respect your elders while calculating how much they consume versus contribute. You work alongside your spouse as partners in survival while acknowledging that either of you could be gone tomorrow from disease, accident, or famine. In this precarious existence, family becomes both your greatest burden and your greatest comfort. The knowledge that you matter to someone, that your suffering has purpose, that your labor benefits those you love, these are the threads that hold you together when everything else threatens to unravel. Religion and superstition. Praying to anything that might listen. In the crushing uncertainty of your existence, supernatural beliefs aren't a philosophical choice, they're essential psychological infrastructure. A world where disasters strike randomly, where children die without explanation, where effort doesn't guarantee survival, is simply too unbearable without some framework to make sense of it all. Your spiritual life is a practical fusion of Buddhism, Shinto practices, and local folk beliefs. You don't see these as separate religions, but as different approaches to managing various supernatural forces that affect your daily life. Buddhism helps you understand suffering and mortality. Shinto connects you to the land and its spirits. Folk beliefs provide practical rituals for specific problems. Buddhism entered Japan centuries before your birth, bringing sophisticated philosophical concepts of karma, rebirth, and enlightenment. But your understanding of Buddhism bears little resemblance to scholarly texts. You've never read a sutra yourself, you're illiterate, and the monks who conduct services in the nearest temple use Sanskrit and classical Chinese that would be incomprehensible even if you could read. Instead, Buddhism filters into your life through rituals, festivals, and simplified teachings. You understand that actions have consequences that may follow you through multiple lifetimes. You know that desire leads to suffering. You recognize that all things are impermanent. These concepts help you accept the harshness of your existence as something that makes cosmic sense, even when it feels senseless. By the Kamakura period, multiple Buddhist sects had established themselves in Japan, each offering different paths to spiritual relief. Pure Land, Buddhism promised rebirth in a paradise realm through faithful recitation of Amida Buddha's name. Zen emphasized meditation and direct experience of reality. Nichiren Buddhism focused on the Lotus Sutra as the ultimate teaching. These doctrinal distinctions matter far less to you than practical concerns. Which local temple provides services for your village? Which sect your lord favors? Which Buddhist rituals seem to produce results? You participate in ceremonies, make modest offerings when you can, and incorporate Buddhist practices that seem beneficial, all while maintaining older beliefs that Buddhism never fully displaced. Shinto, though not called by that name in your time, provides your most immediate connection to the supernatural world. The belief that kami, spirits or gods, inhabit natural features, objects and places shapes how you interact with your environment. The magnificent old cedar tree at the edge of your village has a sacred rope, shimenawa, around its trunk, marking it as a dwelling place of kami. The unusual rock formation in the nearby stream is similarly designated. These kami must be acknowledged, respected, and occasionally appeased. Before clearing new land for planting, your village conducts rituals to ask permission from the spirits of that place. When passing certain locations known to be inhabited by powerful kami, you bow slightly or murmur a brief prayer. These practices aren't theoretical, they're as practical as checking the weather before planting or testing soil quality. Beyond the formal structures of Buddhism and Shinto, a vast ecosystem of local superstitions governs much of your behavior. You know which direction is inauspicious to sleep facing, north, the direction of death. You understand which days are favorable for specific activities according to the complex calendar of lucky and unlucky days. You recognize omens in animal behavior, weather patterns, and dreams. Many of these beliefs center around protecting yourself from malevolent supernatural forces. Yokai, monsters, demons, and spirits pose various threats, each requiring specifics. Countermeasures: the kappa might drag you into rivers, the tengu could cause mischief or madness. The hungry ghosts of those who died with unresolved grievances, especially those who suffered unjust deaths, might return to harm the living. The onryo, vengeful ghosts of those who died with intense rage or jealousy, are particularly feared. These spirits can cause illness, crop failure, natural disasters, and death. Famous onryo like Sugawara no Michizane have been elevated to kami status through propitiation rituals, with shrines built to appease their anger. On a smaller scale, your village has its own local ghosts that must be remembered with offerings and rituals. Religious specialists help you navigate this supernatural landscape. Buddhist monks conduct major life ceremonies and funeral rites. Shinto priests oversee community festivals and agricultural rituals. Itinerant yamabushi, mountain ascetics with mysterious powers, perform exorcisms and healing rituals. Female mediums called miko claim to communicate directly with kami and ancestors, delivering messages and warnings. In times of crisis, epidemic disease, crop failure, unusual natural phenomena, these religious practitioners become essential. When medical knowledge and technology fail, spiritual intervention represents your only remaining hope. You've witnessed entire villages participating in purification rituals, processions, and special prayers when conventional solutions proved inadequate. This spiritual framework isn't merely comforting, it's necessary for survival. When your child falls ill with a fever you can't treat, you make offerings at the local shrine and call for a healer who uses both herbs and incantations. When strange blights affect your crops, you participate in village-wide rituals to cleanse the land of impurities. When earthquakes or floods destroy homes, you understand these as expressions of cosmic forces that must be addressed through spiritual means. Your relationship with these supernatural forces is fundamentally transactional. You make offerings, perform rituals, and observe taboos not out of abstract devotion, but because you expect concrete results. The kami and Buddhas are powerful entities that can help or harm you based on how you interact with them. Prayer isn't a conversation with a loving deity, but a negotiation with powers that must be approached correctly to be effective. What might seem like superstition to later observers is, for you, a sophisticated adaptive system developed over generations of trial and error. The agricultural calendar intertwines with religious observances, creating a framework that helps organize communal labor. Taboos against certain behaviors, like entering forests on specific days, might protect environmental resources. Ritual purifications after contact with death limit the spread of disease. The most psychologically significant aspect of your religious life is ancestor veneration. Your family's deceased members aren't gone, they've simply changed state. The Butsudan in your home contains memorial tablets for parents, grandparents, and other significant relatives. You make regular offerings of food, drink, and prayers, understanding that these ancestors continue to care about and influence family fortunes. During Obon, in midsummer, these ancestors return to visit the living. Your family cleans the graves, prepares special foods, and lights lanterns to guide spirits home. These aren't metaphorical activities. You genuinely believe you're deceased. Grandmother comes to enjoy the offerings and check on her descendants. The boundary between living and dead is permeable, the family extending in both directions across the threshold of mortality. This spiritual framework provides something perhaps more valuable than material comfort, meaning. In a world where suffering seems random and excessive, where your labor rarely improves your condition, where powerlessness is your default state, religion offers a cosmic context that makes it all comprehensible, if not easier to bear. Your suffering isn't meaningless. It's part of a larger pattern that extends beyond your single lifetime. The spiritual dimensions of your harsh existence offer rare glimpses of beauty and transcendence. The purification rituals that require you to stand beneath icy waterfalls in winter are brutally uncomfortable, but leave you feeling mysteriously cleansed. The festival days that punctuate the agricultural calendar provide precious moments of community, color, and joy. The simple act of leaving an offering at a roadside shrine connects you to something larger than your daily struggle, health and medicine. When take 2 leeches and call me in the morning is legitimate medical advice. If there's one aspect of feudal Japanese life that would make modern humans sprint screaming back to the present, it might be the medical system, or more accurately, the haphazard collection of practices, beliefs, and occasional helpful interventions that constitute healthcare in your world. Your understanding of human anatomy and physiology bears little resemblance to modern medical science. Health and illness are explained through concepts like ki, vital, energy, the balance of yin and yang forces, and the flow of humors through the body. Diseases might be attributed to spiritual pollution, demonic possession, karmic punishment, or imbalances in these invisible forces. This doesn't mean your medical care is entirely ineffective. Centuries of observation and experimentation have produced genuine therapeutic knowledge embedded within these conceptual frameworks. Herbal remedies, some of which contain pharmacologically active compounds, are prescribed for specific conditions. Acupuncture and moxibustion, burning mugwort on or near the skin, are used to treat various ailments by influencing the flow of ki through meridians. Your first line of medical defense is usually your family, particularly the oldest women who possess accumulated knowledge of home remedies. For common conditions, digestive problems, minor injuries, typical childhood illnesses, you rarely seek outside help. Your grandmother's recipe for treating stomach pain with ginger and certain tree barks actually works because it contains natural anti-inflammatories and antispasmodics. For more serious conditions, you might consult village specialists. These aren't doctors in the modern sense, but people with specific healing skills. The bone setter handles fractures and dislocations. The herbalist knows which plants treat which symptoms. The midwife assists with childbirth and women's health issues. These practitioners learn through apprenticeship rather than formal education, and their effectiveness varies widely. By the Kamakura period, Japanese medicine had incorporated significant knowledge from Chinese medical texts, creating a system that would later be called Kampo. This included sophisticated pulse diagnosis, detailed herbal pharmacopoeia, and surgical techniques for certain conditions. However, access to practitioners trained in these methods was limited primarily to urban areas and the upper classes. As a peasant, your access to sophisticated medical care is severely limited by geography and economics. The nearest physician, trained in Chinese medical techniques, might be days away in the castle town. Even if you could reach them, their services would cost more than you could afford. Your lord might maintain a physician for his household, but this person would only treat peasants in extraordinary circumstances. Buddhist temples sometimes provide medical services alongside spiritual ones. Monks study medical texts and grow medicinal herbs in temple gardens. During epidemics, temples might become rudimentary hospitals, caring for those without family support. However, their treatments blend spiritual and medical approaches, with prayers and sutras considered as important as herbs and physical interventions. Surgery exists, but is primitive and reserved for desperate situations. Without effective anesthesia, beyond alcohol or opium derivatives, without antiseptics and without antibiotics, surgical procedures carry extreme risks. Battlefield medicine has advanced the understanding of trauma treatment, but techniques like cauterization and amputation are performed with minimal pain control and high mortality rates. The most common serious conditions you face have no effective treatments in your era. Tuberculosis, called rogue or labor damage, kills slowly and inexorably. Various cancers progress without explanation or remedy. Infections that modern antibiotics would easily cure become life-threatening emergencies. Childbirth complications, that would be routine procedures in modern hospitals, frequently result in the death of mother, child, or both. Maternal and infant mortality rates are staggeringly high by modern standards. Approximately 1 in 3 children dies before reaching age 5. Women face approximately a 1 in 50 chance of dying with each childbirth, and with multiple pregnancies being the norm, this accumulates to a significant lifetime risk. Epidemic. Diseases periodically sweep through your region with devastating effect. Smallpox, measles, and influenza can kill significant percentages of village populations in a single outbreak. Without understanding of germ theory, containment measures are limited and often ineffective. Your conceptual framework attributes these outbreaks to miasmas, bad air, angry spirits, or cosmic imbalances rather than microscopic pathogens. The psychological impact of living with untreatable, unexplainable illness is profound. When your child develops a high fever, you have no way of knowing if it's a minor, self-limiting condition or the beginning of a fatal disease. This uncertainty pervades all aspects of health and contributes significantly to the anxiety and fatalism that characterize your worldview. Chronic conditions and disabilities receive minimal accommodation. If you lose a limb, develop blindness, or suffer from neurological disorders, you must rely entirely on family support. No social safety net exists beyond the family unit and limited village assistance. Those without family often face abandonment or death, though Buddhist temples sometimes provide refuge for the disabled and chronically ill. Parasitic infections are nearly universal. Various intestinal worms compete for the limited nutrition in your diet. Lice and fleas are constant companions, vectors for diseases like typhus. More dramatic parasites like the guinea worm create excruciating conditions as they emerge from the skin. These parasites are so common that their presence is considered normal. A healthy person is simply one whose parasite load remains manageable. The human body in feudal Japan is rarely, if ever, free from parasitic infection. Children's distended bellies often indicate significant worm burdens. Scratching is a constant background activity. When examining feces, a common diagnostic technique, the presence of worms is expected rather than alarming. Dental health is particularly abysmal. Without effective cleaning methods beyond chewing sticks and rudimentary toothbrushes, cavities and periodontal disease are widespread. Tooth extraction is the primary treatment for dental pain, performed by barbers or specialized practitioners, using plier-like tools. The black-dyed teeth, or haguro, practiced by some women, particularly in higher classes, actually provides some protection against decay despite its cosmetic purpose. Mental health conditions exist but are understood through entirely different frameworks than modern psychiatry. What might now be diagnosed as depression, anxiety disorders, or schizophrenia are attributed to spiritual possession, imbalanced elements, or character flaws. Treatments range from ineffective to actively harmful, including exorcism rituals, physical restraints, and isolation. Your approach to healthcare ultimately blends pragmatic observation, spiritual belief, and resigned acceptance. You use the herbal remedies that seem to work, participate in healing rituals that offer psychological comfort, if not physical cure, and accept that many illnesses simply run their course toward either recovery or death. This isn't indifference, it's the necessary adaptation to medical limitations that won't be overcome for centuries. The most remarkable aspect of this medical landscape is not how primitive it seems by modern standards, but how much genuine knowledge exists despite conceptual frameworks we now consider incorrect. Many herbal remedies contain active compounds later isolated by pharmaceutical science. Dietary recommendations often include genuinely nutritious foods. Certain physical therapies provide real benefits despite being explained through concepts, like qi flow, rather than anatomy. Your medical system, for all its limitations, represents the accumulated wisdom of countless generations observing cause and effect, testing remedies, and preserving what works. Without microscopes, germ theory, or modern chemistry, people developed surprisingly sophisticated methods for managing health and disease within the constraints of available knowledge and technology. Beauty and hygiene. Looking your best while smelling your worst. In your feudal Japanese existence, personal hygiene and beauty standards exist in an odd tension. Sophisticated aesthetic ideals clash with the practical limitations of your daily life. Let's explore how you maintain yourself when running water, modern soap, and basic toiletries are luxuries beyond imagination. This season's peasant look features the timeless combination of sun-weathered skin, calloused hands, and that distinctive aroma we like to call essence of survival. Accessories include visible parasites, functional dirt patina, and teeth in various stages of decay. It's not a look that will grace imperial poetry collections, but it does effectively communicate "I'm still alive despite everything," which is really the ultimate status symbol in your social circle. Bathing exists in feudal Japan, which places you ahead of many contemporary societies in terms of hygiene. By the Kamakura period, public bathhouses, sento, have emerged in larger towns, and the practice of regular bathing is established among the elite. The famous onsen hot spring baths are occasionally visited by commoners, particularly for their reputed medicinal properties. But your access to these facilities is severely limited by geography and economics. Living in a rural village, you might be days away from the nearest public bath. The rivers and streams near your home serve as your primary bathing facilities during warmer months. In winter, bathing becomes less frequent, perhaps a quick wipe down with a cloth dipped in heated water when the cold makes immersion unbearable. Your concept of soap bears little resemblance to modern detergents. You might use a substance made from plant ash and animal fat, which provides some cleaning properties but isn't particularly effective by modern standards. More commonly, you rely on plain water and physical scrubbing with rough cloth. For hair washing, you might use certain plants with saponine content, like the seeds of the soap nut tree mukuroji, that produce a mild lather when crushed and mixed with water. Rice bran, nuka, serves as an important cleaning agent in feudal Japan, used to scrub both bodies and clothing. When mixed with water, it forms a paste that helps remove dirt and oil. This dual-purpose aspect makes it particularly valuable in a subsistence economy where nothing can be wasted. Dental hygiene is rudimentary at best. You might use a small twig with frayed ends as a primitive toothbrush, sometimes rubbing it with salt for additional cleaning power. Mouth rinsing with water or mild herbal infusions provide some breath freshening. The pickled and fermented foods in your diet actually offer some protective benefit against oral bacteria, but cavity prevention is minimal and dental problems widespread. The concept of deodorant doesn't exist in your world. Body odor is simply part of the human condition, more noticeable in summer and after physical labor. Social norms acknowledge this reality. People don't expect the absence of body odor, merely its management within reasonable limits through basic washing when possible. Your olfactory landscape includes the full spectrum of human scents, with only the upper classes using fragrant oils or incense to mask natural aromas. Your clothing receives even less regular cleaning than your body. Peasant garments are typically made from hemp or other plant fibers, occasionally cotton if you're fortunate. These rough fabrics are sturdy but difficult to clean thoroughly. You might own only 2 sets of clothing, one for daily wear, one slightly better preserved for special occasions, and washing them requires significant labor. Clothing maintenance involves beating, sunning, and occasional immersion in water with rice bran or wood ash. Full washing happens rarely due to the time required and the wear it causes to precious fabrics. Instead, you develop habits that extend wearability, hanging garments in the sun to reduce odors, spot cleaning visible stains, and accepting a baseline level of permanently embedded dirt as normal. Parasites are your constant companions despite your best hygiene efforts. Head lice are so common that specialized combs for removing them are standard household items. Regular delousing is a social activity, with family members examining each other's hair for the tiny creatures. Fleas inhabit your bedding and clothing, their bites an expected irritation rather than an exceptional event. The interior of your home contributes to your hygiene challenges. Floors of packed earth or rough wood collect dust and debris. Cooking over open hearths fills the air with smoke and soot that settles on surfaces and skin. Insect and rodent infestations are difficult to control without modern pesticides. The boundary between indoor and outdoor space is more permeable than in modern homes, allowing dirt to enter easily. Despite these limitations, you maintain standards of cleanliness appropriate to your circumstances. Entryways are designed for removing outdoor footwear. Sleeping areas are kept cleaner than work areas. Food preparation. Implements receive special attention to prevent spoilage and illness. These practices reflect a practical understanding of hygiene even without germ theory. It's worth noting that despite limited access to modern hygiene products and facilities, the bathing culture of feudal Japan placed greater emphasis on bodily cleanliness than many contemporary societies. The concept of ritual purification in Shinto practice contributed to cultural attitudes valuing cleanliness, even when practical implementation was challenging for the lower classes. While basic hygiene focuses on survival and disease prevention, beauty standards add another layer
of complexity to your self-presentation.
You're aware of the aesthetic ideals promoted in court culture, even if you can't possibly attain them. Tales of noble ladies with blackened teeth, painted faces, and elaborate hairstyles circulate even in peasant villages, creating an impossible standard of beauty that exists alongside your daily reality of dirt, sweat, and constant physical labor. For women, beauty practices are particularly constrained by practical considerations. The white face powder, blackened teeth, and plucked eyebrows of aristocratic beauty are largely inaccessible. Instead, practical beauty focuses on maintaining healthy hair, often kept long and tied back for work. Skin protection means covering yourself from sun exposure rather than applying lotions. Wide-brimmed hats and arm coverings preserve the lighter skin that signals indoor work and higher status. For men, appearance concerns center mainly around signifiers of strength and capability. A healthy physique demonstrates your value as a laborer. Facial hair might be maintained or removed according to local customs and personal preference, using primitive razors of sharpened metal that make modern shaving seem luxuriously painless. Hairstyles often reflect practical concerns, hair tied up and out of the way for work with regional variations. Children receive minimal grooming attention beyond basic cleaning and parasite control. Their hair is often kept short or shaved in patterns that facilitate lice management. As they approach marriageable age, more attention is paid to their appearance, particularly for girls whose marriage prospects might be influenced by physical presentation. The elderly experience a significant decline in hygiene assistance as their self-care abilities diminish. Family members provide basic cleaning, but with everyone engaged in essential labor, comprehensive care is limited. This contributes to the distinctive odor often associated with the elderly in your world, a combination of poor hygiene, chronic illness, and changing body chemistry. Perhaps the most striking aspect of your relationship with hygiene and beauty is its fundamentally pragmatic nature. You clean yourself when possible, maintain appearances within reasonable limits, and accept that perfect cleanliness is an impossible luxury. Beauty is appreciated but secondary to survival. Your standards adjust to your circumstances. What would be considered filthy by modern measures might be perfectly acceptable in your context. This pragmatic approach to physical maintenance reflects a broader acceptance of imperfection and impermanence in Japanese aesthetic philosophy. The concept of wabi-sabi, finding beauty in transience and imperfection, may have aristocratic articulations in tea ceremonies and poetry, but it has practical applications in your daily life. You learn to see beauty in weathered hands that tell stories of labor, in faces marked by sun and experience, in the natural processes of aging and decay that modern societies often try desperately to hide. Law and order. Justice hits differently when your head might not stay attached. If you think the legal system in your time is harsh or unfair, prepare for a reality check from feudal Japan, where justice is swift, brutal, and rarely concerned with your side of the story. The concept of innocent until proven guilty is centuries away, and reasonable doubt sounds like seditious talk that might get your tongue removed. The legal framework governing your existence combines aspects of Chinese-influenced legal codes, samurai warrior ethics, and local customary law. This system isn't designed primarily to protect your rights or ensure fair treatment. It exists to maintain social order and enforce the hierarchical structure that keeps you firmly at the bottom. Your first point of contact with the legal system isn't a police officer, but your village headman, shoya. This locally appointed official handles minor disputes, collects taxes, and serves as liaison between your community and higher authorities. His justice is informal but often effective. Disputes over land boundaries, irrigation rights, or personal conflicts are resolved through community pressure and mediation rather than formal court. For more serious matters, you might encounter magistrates, bugyo, appointed by your lord. These officials combine administrative and judicial functions, investigating crimes, conducting trials, and issuing punishments. Their proceedings bear little resemblance to modern courtrooms. No defense attorneys, no juries, no presumption
of innocence. The magistrate questions witnesses, examines evidence, and reaches a decision with nearly unchecked authority. The concept of evidence in your legal system differs dramatically from modern standards. Confessions are considered the
queen of evidence, creating powerful incentives for officials to obtain them by any means necessary. Torture is not merely permitted but essentially required in serious cases where confession is deemed necessary for conviction. Methods of judicial torture in feudal Japan were systematized and recorded in legal manuals. Techniques ranged from relatively mild, being forced to kneel on sharp objects, to extreme suspension upside down over a pit, often with water poured over the face. The legal system recognized that torture produced unreliable confessions, so specific protocols existed to verify confessions by checking for details only the perpetrator would know. Witness testimony carries significant weight, but social status, determines credibility. The word of a samurai automatically outweighs yours. Women, children, and outcast groups have even less legal standing than male peasants. Physical evidence is examined but interpreted through contemporary understanding of cause and effect, without forensic science to guide analysis. The punishments awaiting you for breaking the law are designed not just to penalize, but to terrorize. Public execution is the fate for serious crimes like murder, arson, and certain forms of theft. But death comes in many variations, each carrying symbolic weight and specific deterrence value. Beheading is relatively merciful and reserved for criminals of higher status. Crucifixion, burning alive, boiling, and sawing are reserved for the most heinous offenses. For lesser crimes, punishments focus on shame, pain, and permanent marking. Tattoos identify repeat offenders, making rehabilitation nearly impossible. Flogging with bamboo rods leaves permanent scars. Hand or limb amputation ensures everyone knows your criminal history at a glance. Banishment means near certain death, through starvation or exposure unless you can join the criminal underworld in larger towns. The most distinctive feature of feudal Japanese justice is collective punishment. Your family and neighbors can face consequences for your actions under the principle of collective responsibility, Renza. Village groups, goningumi, of 5 households are mutually responsible for each member's behavior. If you commit a serious crime, your entire family might be executed alongside you. If you flee justice, your neighbors might be punished in your place. This system of collective punishment serves multiple purposes. It creates powerful community pressure to conform to laws and norms. It establishes an informal surveillance network where neighbors monitor each other's behavior. It reduces the administrative burden on authorities by outsourcing much of the control function to communities themselves. Class distinctions permeate every aspect of the legal system. Different punishments apply to different social classes for identical crimes. A samurai might face house arrest or ordered suicide for an offense that would see you executed publicly. Killing someone of higher status carries far greater penalties than killing a social equal or inferior. A samurai can legally kill a disrespectful peasant on the spot under the right circumstances, a practice called kirisute gomen, permission to cut and leave. Your avoidance of the legal system isn't just about fear of punishment. It's a rational response to a system designed to function without your active participation. You have no meaningful right to defense, no ability to appeal, and no expectation of proportional punishment. Your best legal strategy is invisibility, attracting no attention from authorities, resolving disputes internally within your community, and accepting injustices too minor to risk reporting. Criminal organizations exist even in this harsh, punitive environment. Bands of organized thieves, gambling operations, and protection rackets operate in larger settlements. These groups sometimes develop complex hierarchies and codes of conduct that parallel the formal legal system. In periods of weak central authority, these criminal organizations might effectively control significant territories, particularly in urban areas. The concept of prison as punishment is largely absent from your world. Detention facilities exist primarily to hold suspects during investigation and trial, not as punishments themselves. These facilities are horrific by modern standards, dark, filthy, overcrowded, and disease-ridden. Many suspects die before their cases are resolved, particularly during summer months when heat and disease create lethal conditions. For minor infractions that don't merit physical punishment, fines are the primary penalty. These can be devastating to peasant families already living at subsistence level. Unable to pay with currency you don't have, you might find yourself in debt bondage, working off your fine through uncompensated labor that can extend for years, or even generations. Running from justice is rarely a viable option. Without modern transportation or communication, you might temporarily escape local authorities, but surviving as a fugitive presents nearly insurmountable challenges. With no identification system or photography, descriptions of fugitives are generic, but your appearance as a stranger in any village immediately raises suspicion in a society where outsiders are rare and treated with extreme caution. During the Sengoku period, the breakdown of central authority led to significant regional variation in law enforcement. Some domains maintained strict control even during civil war, while others descended into near lawlessness as samurai attention focused on military matters rather than civilian governance. The intersection of legal and religious concepts shapes many aspects of justice in your world. Certain crimes are considered not just violations of human law, but spiritual pollution, kegar, that offends cosmic order. Purification rituals sometimes accompany legal punishments, addressing the spiritual dimensions of crime. Sworn oaths often invoke supernatural consequences for falsehood, with documents signed in blood and sealed with fingerprints as physical manifestations of spiritual commitment. Perhaps most alien to modern sensibilities is the near-total absence of privacy rights in your legal system. Your home can be searched without notice or cause. Your correspondence, if you could write, would enjoy no protection. Your conversations have no expectation of confidentiality if witnessed. The concept that you might have a personal sphere beyond government reach simply doesn't exist. Your body, property, and relationships are all subject to scrutiny and control by authorities whose jurisdiction over you is limited primarily by their interest and attention span rather than by law. This legal landscape creates a profound psychological impact that shapes your entire worldview. You develop a deep-seated wariness of authority, learning to keep your head down and avoid notice. You participate in the community surveillance system because the alternative is becoming its target. You internalize the values of conformity and submission not as philosophical choices but as survival strategies in a world where deviation carries devastating consequences. Yet within this oppressive system, small spaces of resistance and autonomy emerge. Village communities sometimes hide minor offenses from higher authorities, handling them internally to protect members from disproportionate punishment. Oral culture transmits stories of clever peasants outwitting samurai through cunning rather than confrontation. The very harshness of the system creates solidarity among those subject to it, a shared understanding that binds communities together. Leisure and entertainment. Finding joy when everything hurts. Given the crushing burden of agricultural labor, constant threat of violence and perpetual food insecurity, you might assume that life in feudal Japan offers no space for enjoyment. Yet humans, in even the most difficult circumstances, find ways to create moments of pleasure, connection, and meaning. Your entertainment options might be limited compared to modern standards, but they provide essential psychological relief from daily hardship. Welcome to your entertainment options in feudal Japan. While Netflix hasn't quite made it to your village yet, you've developed a surprising variety of ways to distract yourself from the gnawing reality that tomorrow will be just as brutally difficult as today. Let's explore the peasant entertainment landscape, where the cover charge is usually just your last remaining energy after a 14-hour workday. The rhythm of agricultural labor shapes your leisure opportunities. During planting and harvest seasons, you work from dawn until dusk with minimal breaks. But agricultural cycles include relative downtime, particularly in winter when fieldwork diminishes. These periods allow for communal activities, storytelling, craft production, and the festivals that punctuate your calendar. Village festivals, Matsuri, provide your most elaborate entertainment experiences. These events combine religious observance with community celebration, temporarily suspending the strict hierarchies and behavioral constraints of daily life. Even your lord might contribute resources to these celebrations, understanding their value in maintaining social cohesion and releasing built-up tensions. These festivals follow the agricultural calendar, marking planting, harvest, and other significant seasonal transitions. They typically center around the local shrine, with processions carrying portable shrines, mikoshi, ritual performances, food and drink, games and music. For a brief period, your village transforms from a place of labor to a place of collective joy. Festivals served multiple social functions beyond entertainment. They reinforced community bonds, provided controlled outlets for behaviors prohibited in daily life, particularly alcohol consumption, and connected communities to broader regional identities through shared celebration patterns. They also created rare opportunities for young people to meet potential marriage partners outside their immediate family circles. Alcoholic beverages play a significant role in your limited leisure activities. Sake, rice wine, serves as both social, lubricant, and temporary escape from physical and psychological pain. The production process for sake requires significant skill and resources, making it relatively precious. Village sake is cloudy, strong, and bears little resemblance to the refined versions enjoyed by elites. Drinking typically occurs in social contexts rather than alone, with specific rituals governing consumption. Even in your peasant community, pouring for others rather than yourself is the norm. Intoxication provides one of the few socially acceptable contexts for expressing emotions and thoughts normally suppressed by strict social codes. Storytelling constitutes your primary narrative entertainment, with tales passed orally through generations. Professional storytellers occasionally visit rural areas, bringing news and entertainment from broader Japan. These performers might recite epic tales of legendary heroes, recount historical events with dramatic embellishment, or share ghost stories that reflect the spiritual beliefs of your world. The content of these stories often reflects the values and anxieties of your society. Tales of loyalty rewarded and betrayal punished reinforce feudal values. Stories about the supernatural explain misfortunes and mysterious occurrences. Comedic tales often feature clever peasants outwitting samurai or officials, providing cathartic wish fulfillment for audiences who would never dare such behavior in reality. And then, just as the tax collector reached for the last rice bag, the old woman transformed into a fox spirit and disappeared into the forest with all his accounting scrolls. The village was spared collection that year, and the humiliated official never returned. Music pervades both ceremonial and casual aspects of village life. Simple instruments, flutes, drums, shamisen, a three-stringed instrument, and various percussion instruments accompany both religious rituals and secular celebrations. Most musical performance is participatory rather than presentational, with community members joining in songs and dances rather than passively listening. Work songs help synchronize group labor and alleviate monotony. Rice planting, hauling, and processing all have associated rhythmic songs that coordinate movement and distract from physical discomfort. These songs pass down through generations, preserving not just melodies, but embedded knowledge about proper work techniques and timing. Games and sports provide both entertainment and skill development. Children play variations of tag, hide and seek, and games with stones or improvised balls that develop coordination and strategic thinking. Adults compete in wrestling, archery, where permitted, and various strength competitions, particularly during festivals when normal social constraints relax. Gambling exists despite periodic prohibitions by authorities. Dice games, primitive card games using handmade cards, and betting on competitions offer the tempting possibility of improving your economic situation through luck rather than labor. These activities often occur in semi-secrecy, with lookouts watching for officials who might enforce gambling bans. Theatrical performances reach rural areas primarily through travelling troupes that combine religious and secular content. No theatre, with its elaborate masks and stylized movements, originated as a religious ritual before developing artistic dimensions. Kyogen, comic theatre, often accompanies no performances, providing humorous interludes between serious pieces. Puppet theatres, bunraku, tell elaborate stories with skilled puppeteers and chanters. By the end of the medieval period, kabuki begins developing in urban areas, though its early forms would be nearly unrecognizable compared to later traditions. These theatrical traditions rarely reach remote villages in their full form, but elements filter through in simplified versions performed by traveling players or local amateurs inspired by performances they've witnessed. The theatrical forms developing during this period established aesthetic principles that would influence Japanese arts for centuries. Concepts like yugen, profound, mysterious beauty, aware, pathos, the awareness of impermanence, and mr, the meaningful space between elements, found expression in performance traditions before being articulated in theoretical writings. Visual arts enter your life primarily through the religious realm. Temple and shrine paintings, statues, and architectural elements represent your main exposure to professional artistic expression. Simpler folk art traditions, textiles with distinctive patterns, painted good luck symbols, carved wooden objects, bring aesthetic elements into daily life without the refinement of court arts. Seasonal appreciation of nature constitutes a significant leisure activity that crosses class boundaries, though experienced differently at each social level. Cherry blossom viewing, hanami, in spring, and moon viewing in autumn emerge as formalized aesthetic practices. While aristocrats compose poetry about these experiences, your appreciation is more straightforward but no less genuine, momentary. Respite from labor to acknowledge beauty in your harsh world. Sexual activity functions as both procreation and recreation in your world, though moral frameworks and practical constraints shape its expression. Buddhist teachings nominally discourage sexual indulgence, while practical concerns about pregnancy and resource limitations suggest caution. Nevertheless, human desire finds expression within, and sometimes outside, marriage bonds. Unlike the elite, classes whose sexual practices are increasingly codified and aestheticized during this period, your intimate life remains relatively unrecorded and unregulated beyond basic community norms against disruptive behavior. Privacy is limited in crowded household arrangements, lending intimacy a necessarily opportunistic quality that might seem strikingly matter-of-fact by modern standards. Hot springs, onsen, provide rare opportunities for sensory pleasure and physical relief when accessible. The therapeutic effects of mineral-rich waters on bodies broken by agricultural labor make these experiences particularly precious. Bathing culture develops both practical hygiene functions and social relaxation aspects, creating spaces where hierarchical distinctions temporarily soften, if never fully disappear. Reading and writing remain largely inaccessible luxury skills for most peasants throughout the medieval period. Limited literacy might exist among village leaders who need to manage tax records and communicate with authorities. Buddhist temples sometimes provide rudimentary education to selected children, primarily boys, creating islands of literacy in a sea of oral culture. The most profound difference between your leisure and modern entertainment isn't the specific activities, but their integration into life's fabric. Entertainment isn't a separate category of experience, but emerges from and returns to daily functions. Work songs make labor bearable. Festivals ensure good harvests while providing pleasure. Stories preserve practical knowledge within entertaining narratives. Religious rituals offer both spiritual comfort and aesthetic experience. This integration means leisure doesn't stand in opposition to real life, but exists as its necessary companion. Without modern concepts of work-life balance, you experience both brutal hardship and genuine joy, often within the same day or even the same activity. The pleasure of drinking cool water while working in summer fields, the satisfaction of skillful tool use, the comfort of firelight conversations. These small joys punctuate suffering without negating it. The psychological function of these leisure activities cannot be overstated. They provide essential relief valves for social tensions, create spaces for emotional expression otherwise constrained by strict social codes, preserve cultural identity across generations, and offer glimpses of beauty and transcendence in lives defined largely by struggle and limitation. The end of your day. Darkness falls in more ways than one. As the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, your body registers both relief and apprehension. The day's most backbreaking labor will soon end, but darkness brings its own challenges in a world without reliable artificial light. The transition from day to night marks a fundamental boundary in your existence, one that modern humans, surrounded by electric illumination, can hardly comprehend. The twilight hour arrives, painting the rice fields in golden shadow. Your shoulders ache with a familiar pain that has become almost a companion over the years. The hoe feels impossibly heavy in your calloused hands as you make your final passes through the earth. Around you, fellow villagers straighten their bent backs, wincing as vertebrae protest years of submission to gravity and necessity. Your return to the village follows well-worn paths, navigated by muscle memory as much as vision. Fellow workers exchange minimal conversation, saving what little energy remains for the evening tasks that await at home. The communal fieldwork might be ending, but your day continues with livestock care, equipment maintenance, food preparation, and other essential activities that cannot wait until morning. The quality of light changes dramatically as you approach your home. Without glass windows, the interior remains dim even during daytime. As evening approaches, the contrast between outside and inside becomes less pronounced. Your dwelling entryway design, typically a small covered space for removing footwear, marks the transition from public to private space, from work identity to family role. Artificial lighting in your world consists primarily of fire in various contained forms. The irori hearth at the center of your main room provides both cooking heat and illumination. Oil lamps using vegetable oil or fish oil offer focused light for specific tasks. Candles made from beeswax or plant-based waxes exist, but represent a significant expense beyond most peasant households' means. These light sources share critical limitations. They're expensive in terms of fuel, provide minimal illumination by modern standards, require constant attention to maintain, and present serious fire hazards in wood and paper structures. Light is never taken for granted, but measured and rationed like any other precious resource. Many activities simply wait for daylight rather than consuming valuable illumination. The psychological impact of natural light cycles on pre-industrial populations is difficult for modern people to fully comprehend. Without easily available artificial light, human activity patterns followed solar rhythms far more strictly than today. Seasonal changes in daylight hours dramatically affected productive time available, particularly for tasks requiring visual precision. Your evening meal represents the day's main nutritional intake. The morning and midday food consumption provided energy for immediate work requirements, but evening offers slightly more time for food preparation and consumption. Family members gather around the irori, the hearth serving as both kitchen and dining room table. The meal's content varies with seasons, economic circumstances, and recent harvest conditions. As previously discussed, your diet consists primarily of grains, rarely rice for commoners, vegetables, and occasional protein from small fish, eggs, or soybean products. Portions are carefully controlled, with clear hierarchies determining who eats first and most. Children learn early that food distribution reflects social position rather than hunger levels. Conversation during meals follows similar hierarchical patterns. Male household heads typically speak first and most, with women, children, and elderly members contributing when appropriate. These conversations provide essential information transfer about agricultural conditions, community matters, and family concerns. The day's experiences, problems encountered, and tasks for tomorrow receive brief, practical discussion. After eating comes the evening's productive work. Modern distinctions between work and leisure poorly describe your reality, where almost every activity serves multiple purposes. Women prepare fibers and weave textiles that both clothe the family and might generate small income. Men repair tools and prepare materials for the next day's labor. Children assist with tasks appropriate to their age and abilities. These evening activities often allow for the day's only significant social interaction. Stories are shared, community news exchanged, and cultural knowledge transmitted while hands remain busy with productive tasks. Multi-generational teaching occurs naturally, as older family members demonstrate skills to younger ones. The combination of useful work with social connection creates a distinctive evening atmosphere that serves both practical and psychological functions. Personal hygiene before sleep is minimal by modern standards. You might wipe your face and hands. With a damp cloth, rinse your mouth with water and change into sleeping garments if separate clothing exists for this purpose. Without indoor plumbing or heated water readily available, more comprehensive cleaning typically waits for community bath days or trips to natural water sources. Sleeping arrangements reflect both practicality and family hierarchy. The floor plan of your typical farmhouse includes few internal walls with spaces defined by function rather than rigid separation. Sleeping areas consist of thin mats, precursors to later futon development, laid directly on raised wooden floors. These are stored during the day and brought out at night to maximize usable space in the small dwelling. Your sleeping space measures perhaps 2 arm lengths by 1, pressed close to family members for warmth and space efficiency. Privacy is a concept largely foreign to your sleeping arrangements. The entire family typically sleeps in the same room, with minimal separation between generations. Body heat becomes an essential resource during winter months, with family members sleeping closer together for thermal regulation. Bedding materials consist primarily of whatever textiles the family can produce or acquire. Stuffed cloth serves as primitive pillows with designs that support the neck rather than the modern concept of head cushioning. Coverings range from simple woven blankets to quilted covers stuffed with available insulating materials, cotton if fortunate, but more commonly plant fibers or even dried grass. Sleep itself differs significantly from modern patterns. Without artificial light extending activity into night hours, your body more closely follows natural circadian rhythms. You typically fall asleep shortly after full darkness and wake with the sun. However, historical evidence suggests pre-industrial sleep patterns often included a first sleep period, a wakeful interlude of an hour or two, and then a second sleep until dawn. This middle-of-the-night waking period served various purposes: checking security, tending fires, monitoring livestock, or attending to bodily needs might occupy this time. Couples might use this relatively private interval for intimate relations. Some historical sources suggest this wakeful period was valued for reflection, prayer, or quiet conversation impossible during busy daylight hours. The quality of your sleep would likely shock modern humans accustomed to temperature-controlled environments and engineered sleep surfaces. Physical discomfort from the day's labor, parasitic infections causing itching, respiratory issues from indoor smoke, hunger pangs, and ambient temperatures all affect your rest. What modern people might consider severe insomnia-inducing conditions, you accept as normal sleeping environment. Night brings specific fears and dangers in your world. Fire represents the most immediate threat, with unattended lamps or hearths potentially destroying not just your home, but entire villages of closely packed wooden structures. Night watchmen patrol larger settlements, their primary function being fire detection rather than crime prevention. Their wooden clappers mark the hours while reassuring residents that someone remains vigilant. Supernatural threats loom larger in darkness. Your spiritual framework includes numerous nocturnal entities that threaten both body and soul. Yokai become more active and dangerous after sunset. The ghosts of improperly honored ancestors might return with grievances. These beliefs aren't distant superstitions, but immediate experiential realities that shape your relationship with darkness. Practical nighttime dangers include vermin drawn to food stores, weather events that might damage crops or structures, livestock birthing or health emergencies, and human threats ranging from thieves to rival village conflicts. Without instant communication methods, night emergencies present particularly difficult challenges, often relying on pre-established signal systems like drum patterns or fire signals. Dreams hold significant meaning in your cognitive framework, often interpreted as communications from supernatural realms rather than internal psychological processes. Particularly vivid or unusual dreams might be shared with family members or village religious specialists for interpretation. These dream narratives contribute to your culture's collective spiritual understanding and occasionally influence community decisions. As you drift between wakefulness and sleep on your thin mat, your psychological state reflects the fundamental reality of feudal Japanese peasant existence, perpetual uncertainty tempered by rigid routine. Tomorrow will likely mirror today in its demands and limitations. Yet any night might bring the disasters that periodically reset peasant life: fire, flood, military conflict, epidemic disease, or official demands that exceed your capacity to fulfill. Perhaps the most distinctive quality of your consciousness as you approach sleep is the absence of expectation that life should be otherwise. Modern discontent often stems from the gap between reality and imagined alternatives. Your mental framework includes few such alternatives. The lives of your grandparents, your grandchildren, and everyone in between are expected to follow essentially identical patterns, varying only in degree of hardship rather than fundamental structure. This limited horizon of possibility might seem depressing to modern sensibilities, trained to value progress, choice, and individual fulfillment. Yet it creates a certain psychological cohesion rarely experienced in modern life. Your identity is firmly embedded in family, village, and ancestral continuity. Your actions have clear meaning within established value systems. The question, "What should I do with my life?" never arises because the answer is predetermined by your birth position. As consciousness fades, your last thoughts might touch on tomorrow's weather and its implications for fieldwork, a child's recent cough and whether it presages serious illness, or gratitude for another day of survival in a world where such continuation is never guaranteed. Simple concerns, perhaps, by the standards of later centuries, but no less profound for their immediacy and universal human significance. The beautiful and the damned. As dawn breaks over the mountains, painting rice fields with golden light, you rise to face another day fundamentally identical to the one before. Your back protests as you sit up from your sleeping mat. Your stomach growls with familiar hunger. Your hands, calloused beyond feeling in some places, automatically reach for the tasks that await no matter how your body feels about the prospect. This has been your journey through a single day in feudal Japan, a day multiplied by thousands, to create a lifetime multiplied by millions, to create the historical experience that forms the foundation of one of history's most fascinating cultures. What can we take from this uncomfortable immersion into the past? Perhaps the most striking revelation is how much beauty emerged from such brutal circumstances. The aesthetic traditions that would later dazzle the world, Zen gardens, tea ceremony, haiku poetry, minimalist design, developed in this context of material deprivation and rigid hierarchy. The philosophical concepts that continue to influence global thought, wabi-sabi, embracing imperfection, mono no aware, recognizing transience, ma appreciating negative space, were responses to existential conditions that offered little control but much opportunity for meaning-making. Your peasant hands, breaking earth and hauling rice, made possible the elegant courtier's hand, writing poetry on delicate paper. Your tax payments funded the temples whose architectural perfection still draws visitors centuries later. Your acceptance of the established order enabled the stability in which art could flourish, even if you never saw the results yourself. This is not to romanticize suffering or justify exploitation. Rather, it acknowledges the complex relationship between constraint and creativity, between social structure, cultural production. The Japan that would eventually produce global cultural treasures was built on the bent backs of peasants who lived and died in conditions that modern humans would find intolerable. The feudal Japanese social order contained profound contradictions that would eventually contribute to its transformation. Buddhist compassion coexisted with brutal punishment. Systems, refined aesthetic sensibilities developed alongside grinding poverty. Concepts of honor and loyalty justified inequities that benefited those at the social apex while demanding greatest sacrifice from those at the bottom. What might be most alien to modern sensibilities is not the material hardship of your existence, though that was severe by any standard, but the psychological framework through which you experienced that hardship. You lacked the modern concept of progress that assumes conditions should naturally improve over time. You accepted hierarchical differences as cosmic order rather than social construction. You measured your life against those in your immediate community rather than distant alternatives glimpsed through media. This is not to suggest you were less intelligent or less emotionally complex than modern humans. Your adaptability, practical knowledge, and emotional resilience would likely put many contemporary people to shame. The cognitive frameworks developed to survive in your world required sophisticated understanding of natural systems, complexity, social navigation skills, and psychological fortitude that few modern humans cultivate to the same degree. Perhaps what's most valuable about this historical exercise isn't learning how different your life was from modern existence, though those differences are stark, but recognizing the underlying human constants that persist across centuries. The desire for security and meaning, the comfort of belonging, the fear of suffering and loss, the hope that children might thrive. These emotional fundamentals transcend historical period and social position. Your feudal Japanese existence, for all its alien qualities, reminds us that human adaptation knows few limits. People create meaningful lives under conditions that seem categorically unacceptable from comfortable historical distance. They find purpose, connection, beauty, and even moments of joy while navigating systems of constraint and exploitation that shape every aspect of their experience. This is not an argument for accepting injustice or romanticizing the past. Rather, it's a recognition of the remarkable human capacity to create meaning within whatever parameters existence provides. Your life in feudal Japan would be brutally hard by modern standards, yet it would also contain moments of connection, purpose, and beauty that many contemporary humans, surrounded by material comfort but disconnected from community and clear meaning structures, might envy. As we return to our climate-controlled rooms, abundant food options, and medical treatments that would seem miraculous to your feudal eyes, perhaps we might carry one insight from your world. Life's meaning emerges not from perfect conditions, but from how we engage with whatever conditions we face. Your feudal existence, for all its harshness, reminds us that humans find ways to matter to each other, to create beauty, and to make meaning in even the most challenging circumstances. That dirt-floored hut, seen through modern eyes, might register only as deprivation. But it was also home, the center of a world as emotionally complex and meaningful as any that would follow in more comfortable centuries. Your calloused hands both broke soil and soothed children. Your life story, invisible to official histories, nevertheless contained the full spectrum of human experience: love, loss, fear, hope, and moments of transcendence that defied your material circumstances. Like and subscribe if you've ever complained about anything in your life, because I guarantee your feudal Japanese counterpart would trade problems with you in a heartbeat.